Boom, 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 boom.
Welcome back to Cross Politic. Gabriel, what kind of sunflower seeds are those?
This interview is brought to you by David's Jumbo Sunflower Seeds, Buffalo Ranch style, man.
I don't know if I know if I'm
baseball
down.
season.
I'm not
so
down
I just
with Buffalo Ranch.
Want to start chewing?
I'm
during
not.
baseball season.
I'm not down with Buffalo Ranch.
What is baseball season? Do people still watch that?
Shut up, David.
Huh? Oh. Okay.
Hey,
I don't know.
we got a special guest.
Yes.
Our special guest is Dustin Messer. He teaches theology and worldview at Legacy Christian Academy. He's a senior fellow of theology and culture at the Center for Cultural Leadership. That's important.
Wow.
He's also an associate pastor at Christ Church, PCA Church in Carrollton, Texas. My gracious, this is like he's studied like everywhere in the world.
Not Moscow.
La Salle University, Boyce College, Covenant Seminary.
You went to Covenant.
Yeah.
Wow, he's written a whole bunch of stuff. It says he's published by a host of organizations.
That's a lot.
An army of organizations.
He's not published on our blogazine.
Right.
We need to correct that, Dustin.
Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals, Gospel Coalition, Cersei Institute, Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, Mere Orthodoxy, Theopolis Institute. Hey, Dustin, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you, guys. You forgot to mention that I'm from Texas. But thank you anyway.
No.
Yes, amen, Dustin.
We didn't forget.
We actually didn't forget.
We didn't forget.
No. we know.
Okay, good.
We know how
Good.
much you Texans like to brag, so we knew you were going to bring it in with that anyway.
Yeah, right.
Hey, it's not bragging. It's humility because it's the promised land. That's what it is.
Is abortion illegal in Texas?
Ooh.
Uh-oh.
Ooh.
I'm just wondering. This is the promised land and all.
Hey, unholiness.
Y'all doing good on your taxes?
Unholiness was still present in the promised land.
Oh,
Yeah. They left some of those giants in the land for you to drive them out, huh?
That's right.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, and Dustin, so you teach at a Christian school. Is that high school?
Yeah, it is. I teach. It's a K-12 school, but I teach the theology in the theology department at the upper school.
Yeah. And you have a family?
Yeah, so I'm married to Whitney, my wife, Texas Aggie, and we don't have any kids yet, but we have a dog named Schaefer who may or may not bark here in a minute.
Hey.
Hey, where did the dog get his name from?
just a family name?
Just wondering.
The first time I met the dog, he was wearing knickers, and so I thought, I have a good name for you.
Schaefer.
there you
Does he
go.
have a big long goatee? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. His doghouse we call the Brie. The whole thing's pretty dorky.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's kind of
hilarious.
over the top. So, we wanted to ask you a little bit about we read an article of yours where you were kind of chiming in on the Benedict option stuff. So Rod Dreher, or Rod Dreher if you're Gabriel Wrench.
It'd be Rod Dreher.
He's this what is he, conservative, what is it, American conservative, or what?
Yeah, American conservative website, right?
Yeah, so it's like one of the biggest Christian websites in existence.
Yeah.
He wrote this book called The Benedict Option, and you were chiming in on it a little bit in this recent article. Can you just briefly sketch? We haven't really talked about this at all on Cross Politic yet.
No, we haven't.
But from your vantage point, what's going on? What's up with that particular book? And sketch the conversation that's going on for us.
Yeah, so kind of shortly, Dreher is looking at American culture, and he's seeing, I think rightly, that there's not a ton of difference between people who go to church and people who don't go to church. So divorce rates are similar, a number of metrics across the board where you're not really seeing a huge difference in church people. So Dreher says, instead of being focused on engaging culture and that kind of thing in the moment, in the present, we need to sort of go back to first things, to first principles, and get the church family right first. And that involves, developing certain habits, a way of life together, kind of a classic, catechumenate relationship where people come into the church and they're actually immersed in a way of life and a series of habits. So that there's actually something to hand down. We don't just have this sloppy, sort of Manila faith that has no real transforming power, which I really appreciate a lot. In the article, I think, and Rod has been, I've never met him. He's quoted me before really nicely, and I really appreciate a ton that he's written.
Yeah.
But my fear is that it might be used to evade Christ's call for us to to bring all of creation under his lordship, right? And to engage in the arts and all sorts of
now,
things.
Now, specifically, what did you read in the Benedict option that kind of made you kind of see maybe, hey, there's some retreatist mentality that we shouldn't be having?
Yeah, I think that he orders ecclesial life and then sort of cultural engagement in sort of timed ways, so that you do one and then you do the other. The thing is, cultural engagement, but just missiology, reaching our neighbors and so forth, is itself a spiritual habit, right? So you can't just say that's something we'll put off for the future any more than you can say fasting is something you put off for the future, or prayer, the Lord's Supper.
But let me push.
This is just a whole way of life.
I just want to push back a little bit, though, that but if you have a broken home, like the first thing you have to do is take care of home first, right? Or is it something that you can do simultaneously?
Yeah, no, that's a totally fair point. And I think the Benedict option has a lot of helpful correctives in it. I would just say one of the things broken, I would just say that the kingdom that Christ is claiming is all of creation. So the home for us is this whole world.
Oh, preach, brother. Preach. Come on now.
So that's all I'd say is that we have to have sort of an eye bigger than just the church. Christ isn't just coming to claim the church. His kingdom is extensive as all of creation, right?
Yeah, well, I think, to David's objection too, a little bit. Well, if you clean your house, that has automatic ramifications for what everyone sees in the outside. So automatically, when you start fixing up your house, people start seeing what's going on, and it immediately starts impacting culture. Just the very fact that you're cleaning your house, repairing it, working on the siding on the outside.
But there's also a sense in which the gospel requires you can't act. So I know this is an analogy, but you can't.
Let's run with it.
You actually
let's get it all the way out.
You can't actually clean up your house unless you're actually reaching out, unless you're actually engaging the world around you. And so, maybe that's what you're getting at, Dustin, is that you kind of have to do both simultaneously, because there's sort of a symbiotic relationship between the church and its place in the world.
And are you kind of referring to like Galatians 6:1? You who are spiritual, go and restore those who are not being spiritual. So be spiritual first, and then go and restore those who are not being spiritual.
Well, if the central act of the church is worship, we come in to worship. We're called to worship, and we bring with us ourselves, and we offer to God all that we are. Your job, your school, your kids, your neighbor. You're bringing
living sacrifice.
Yeah, all of it to God, and then God sends you back out into the world, right, with His blessing. And so you can't. You don't just get to stay there, or you have to go out, and that means you've got to go out and engage your neighborhood. You got to engage the city council. You got to engage the abortion clinic down the street. You got to engage those things because God sent you out.
But
right.
So just to push back again, why am I finding myself the one always pushing back? You guys push back a little bit. If you find that, maybe this is part of the point, which is if you find that you proclaiming something, the fruit of what you're proclaiming isn't found in your community, what's the first thing you should be doing, though?
I don't know what.
So, like, if you're proclaiming to, hey, you know what, the gospel is meant to repair and keep people together, and then the person says, but you guys' divorce rate's the same as ours.
Right.
Right. If you're proclaiming a gospel that does something, and they're looking like,
if you're saying marriage for life,
right, exactly, and they're looking back behind you saying,
40%.
I don't understand why you proclaiming something that we got.
Right. So so probably one of the first levels of the mission though is you leave the church and you got to go home with your wife,
right,
and you got to apply the gospel in your family,
right.
Is that what you're getting at, Dustin?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. There is a certain hypocrisy in the church, and that we do have to clean that up and that sort of thing. I guess my issue is when you look at the spread of the gospel, it isn't something that could just be mapped in sociological terms where, it just sort of makes complete sociological sense why the church would spread. So though, yeah, things do see like divorce rate, all sorts of things, which I agree, just church discipline, the institution of the church, her peace and purity need to be protected. Absolutely. And so that's a hugely helpful emphasis Dreher has brought to the conversation. I just think that we can't be evading our call to engage neighborhoods, as you said, city councils, all sorts of things, until we reach some sort of, metric where, okay, we can say the church is healthy. Now let's go do this.
Right.
Y'all know I got mentioned on Ron Dreher's blog one time.
Nice. Favorably?
No.
Nice.
No.
He don't like you.
He didn't like me at all.
What did you do?
Well, I wrote something in response to this. There was this like conference with Fred Sanders and Peter Leithart and who was the third guy? And it was at down in California?
Was it Carl Truman?
Carl Truman, yeah. It was that thing.
Yeah.
What was that thing called, Dustin?
Oh gosh, I don't even remember.
Well, you know what I'm talking about. But it was like like Future of Protestantism or something like that.
Okay.
And so I said a bunch of things, but I went off in the. So Dreher is Eastern Orthodox.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. And so
well, that changes the conversation.
I went off on praying to icons, and I likened it to people looking at swimsuit issues.
And he didn't like that?
Liturgical swimsuit models. And he wrote a whole post on me.
Oh, nice.
It's in the archive somewhere.
Going to Google now.
Swimsuit Rod Dreher.
Be careful.
Toby Sumter. Swimsuit Toby Sumter.
I'm not putting that in my Google search. No, y'all ain't have me go before the elders.
We got you.
But I was kind of wondering if any of what you're picking up on there, Dustin, might be actually connected to his orthodoxy, his Eastern Orthodoxy. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't, my reading of Eastern Orthodox is so limited. I think of a really great book by Alexander Schmemann, For the Life of the World.
Right.
In which, I see the themes that kind of, I think I would at least want to bring out of the more sort of missiological nature of the church, brought out. So I don't know. That's a great question.
When you say missiological, I feel like that's kind of a buzzword that has become a cool word to say. But what do you mean behind that?
Yeah. So when I think of the missional nature of the church or the mission of the church, I think of Psalm 1, right? So the kings, the princes of the earth should be kissing the Son. They should be ruling in a way in favor with Yahweh. And so I think that the church looks to what Christ is doing in the world, which is bringing all spheres of life, all areas of creation under his good rule. And the church is a member of that. I don't know if you ever read Keith Matheson's book on eschatology, but he talks about through suffering and death, Christ raises victorious. And he says this really great line that through suffering and death, his people will bring the world to him victorious also. So, which I think is a helpful sort of way of thinking about mission, right?
Right.
Now, why the church is, we talked a lot about this on the show. At some level, ultimately, the church is lost its backbone. And all that, it's actually the pastors who become cowards in a lot of ways. And this is seen, I remember during David Daldian's Planned Parenthood video, when that was just going all over the internet, that how many pastors I could think of that used that as a moment to rally the troops against the pro-choice movement. And not very many. There's maybe, and I try to stay connected or try to listen to pastors all over and podcasts and everything, but I couldn't think of that many pastors, or I didn't hear that many pastors that actually stood up and preached against abortion in that time. In fact, I heard pastors literally who said they would not preach on abortion because it was being so politicized. And so and of course, homosexuality. I mean, we go down the list of all these current cultural sins where we've just become cowards as pastors engaging culture.
Yeah.
I wonder.
I'll say, hopefully, I preached at a banquet for a crisis pregnancy center a few weeks ago, and it is true that there weren't as many pastors from local churches as you would hope, but the amount of young people, say under 25 there, from like 17 to 25, it was predominantly who was in the audience, probably 400, 500, which was really encouraging to me.
It is.
Absolutely.
I was thinking about the post that we read by you, Dustin, where you point out this idea. You point to Daniel as this faithful presence in Babylon. Yeah. That he's a servant and he's doing good to the king. He's saving the lives of all these pagan astrologers and all this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But he's also taking the opportunity, you say, but he also took the opportunity to challenge that state in the name of the God of heaven to mend its ways in line with a paradigm of justice derived from Sinai. That's, I think there's that balance is so hard. And it seems like there's a lot of talk of, this goes back to Gabriel's point. There's a lot of talk of, the mission of the church and being missional and, doing good to the city, being a presence in the city. But I feel like there's still this real, reticence to be much of a prophetic voice to the city. Are you, again, I mean, maybe abortion is where we get closest to that, but even as Gabriel's pointing out, it seems like it's still, we haven't hit our stride. Yeah.
No, I think that's exactly right. And going back to my dog for a minute, or actually going back to Francis Schaeffer.
I knew he had a first name.
Schaeffer is invited by Harold O.J. Brown, actually, to come give some lectures in Boston.
Yeah.
I think 1978 or something. He's lecturing and you read the poem from a nihilist. And I'm reading his biography, and it says, everybody in the room starts laughing because it's kind of a silly poem. It's, obviously sort of ridiculous, and they're secularists and so forth. And Schaeffer stops midway through and with a tear in his eye says, the person who wrote this poem, apart from Christ, is damned. He's going to hell. And he says, how can you have that disposition? And I just thought, what a great model of someone who, on the one hand, he's trying to be relevant in a sense, but he doesn't sort of evade the hard doctrines. It's through the hard doctrines that out of love, he's led to engagement. So it is, I think we tend to think, well, let's go engage, but let's put aside the quote unquote political things like abortion or so forth. But when we're genuinely moved by the deep doctrines, deep truths of Christianity, we actually push into them with a tear in our eye, with love, and we encounter them. Yeah.
Hey, Dustin, thank you so much for being on Cross Politic. Where can people read your writings at?
Yeah, I write for a few organizations, the Gospel Coalition, but mostly I kind of, on a weekly basis, I'm at Kuyperian Commentary, which is kuyperian.com.
And just, where's your church located in Texas?
Yeah, we're in. That's a great question.
Yeah.
So if Dallas is the Jerusalem of Texas, we're just to the north of down about 15 minutes from downtown Dallas in Carrollton, Texas.
Bethlehem.
There you go. Hey, more Cross Politic when we come back. Thanks again, Dustin.
Thank you, man.